It's been a long day for me, and if you could scoot in a foot so I don't have to scream for the whole night. If you want to chat with other preppers or whatever, that's cool. Take 2 steps back and go up to the camping area. You can see the rabbits tomorrow. It's not happening until 3 o'clock. And I'll begin. So, but I'm going to wait till everybody calms down first. Wow. How does my face look on camera with the lights?
It's like, it's alright. It's alright.
Okay, holy shite. Okay. Oh. Okay. No, that's good. That's okay. All right, are we recording?
Yeah.
All right. Wait till everybody settles in. Okay. EMP.
Do you want me to yell?
What's that? No, it's okay. People want to talk during my presentation. It's all right. Biggest preparedness event in Canada. It's okay. It's all right. It's just an EMP. Don't worry about it. Does anybody know what an EMP is? What's an EMP? Let's start there. What does that mean?
Electromagnetic pulse.
It means electromagnetic pulse. What? Okay, there's my first question. I don't remember this PowerPoint. I'm still thinking about the dog that took the crap over there, or maybe the human. We don't know. We don't know what happened. My mind is a little boggled. I've only had a few Timbits today and 1.5 beers. So if I'm slurring, it's because I'm tired and not drunk. Yeah. Okay, electromagnetic pulse. That's what it stands for. So, a short burst of electromagnetic... What's that?
Louder.
No, you come closer. I already requested that. I already got a heckler, and I'm 2 minutes in. A short burst of electromagnetic energy. What is that? What is electromagnetic energy? I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm not anything. I'm a programmer. So, the way that I understand, we've got a guy that's he's an apprentice electrical engineer, he's here, so he can go into the advanced stuff. We're not going to get very complicated with what, what an E1 is compared to an E3 or E2 with respect to a HAMP or high altitude electromagnetic pulse. But the way that I understand it is when you have an electromagnetic pulse, it's a pulse that covers something called the electromagnetic spectrum, the entire spectrum. The spectrum is a big wave. It's a big wave, and then kids are screaming in the background, losing my concentration. It gets progressively slower, so don't pay so much attention to a lot of this stuff here, but look at this wave here, and we can see that these waves here that's a TV, that's cell phone, that's microwave. Some of it is visible light, some of it is auditory, some of it we can interpret or hear auditorily. I don't think we're going to be gutting rabbits tomorrow only. So it's a pulse of electric energy that covers the entire electromagnetic spectrum. What happens with an EMP is this. It basically overloads circuits are designed in a way that they can only accept a certain amount of voltage and amperage. An EMP provides for a very large amount of voltage and amperage, overloading circuits to the point that they can burn on fire. What causes an EMP?
Nuclear bomb in the atmosphere.
Nuclear bomb in the... What more about the atmosphere?
Well, 200 miles up, I think they said, or something.
CME.
Yeah, coronal mass ejection.
Coronal mass ejection. It's actually two ways, and then the natural splits into two. So you've got something called a coronal mass ejection, or CME. And a solar flare. They're two different things. We'll talk about them in a second. And man-made. So man-made being?
The nuclear bomb.
A nuclear bomb.
We can make that other way.
A nuclear bomb. A certain height. What height?
I'd say about 100 miles in the atmosphere, I think.
100 miles? Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. There's a lot of...
Lower.
Heckler number 2. There's a lot of confusion about this online with respect to the distance, how high it has to be, but that's the least of our concerns. First is a coronal mass ejection or solar flare, like I said. A nuclear weapon the byproduct of a nuclear weapon causes an electromagnetic pulse. What's the difference between a CME and a solar flare? So we know that the sun has got activity. We've got this big ball of fire that's been around for 5 billion years, and once in a while it gets angry and it burps. Basically, it's if you can see two contortionists trying to make out with each other, that's the internals of what's happening inside the sun. Gases start to mix, and then there's this explosion. But more specifically, the difference between, well, the similarities are there a giant explosion of electricity. Sometimes occur at the same time, sometimes they don't. Magnetic fields contorting. The inside of the sun is contorting and wants to release that energy. And the byproduct of releasing that energy is sometimes it's a solar flare, sometimes it's a coronal mass ejection, sometimes it's both. A coronal mass ejection is generally a lot slower. It's more like a cannon. This is the best analogy. This was either NASA or another gentleman named Jerry Manuelson, which we'll talk about shortly, as far as giving a metaphorical example to sort of visualize what the difference is. Coronal mass ejection is slow like the cannon. A solar flare is more like the initial flash, if you're familiar with firearms. Basically what happens is we get this energy that's, if we have a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection, we could be okay because it could be going this way and Earth is over here. However, when it does flow, a coronal mass ejection, specifically, what happens is it interacts with our magnetics, our geomagnetic. What's the word? Magnetosphere. Yes, and it wreaks havoc with respect to. Well, we'll talk about the effects of it in a second. The sun is got these cycles. Every 11 years and a bit, according to NASA. Some people say 13, some people will say 10. NASA says 11 and a bit. I'm going to say 11 and a bit. The important thing that you've got to recognize with this is we have something called the solar maximus or solar maximum, where the heights of
Solar activity?
Thank you. You guys get up here and help me present this. The height of solar activity happens once every 11.5 years. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have a serious event irrespective of having a maximum year. Areas affected. So this is based on the assumption we've got what's called a HEMP, high altitude nuclear device, nuclear electromagnetic pulse in the center of America. This is an idea of the areas that would be affected here. So where would be an ideal spot if you were a bad person, we'll call them? Where would be an ideal spot to launch one of these things? 50 miles, I've heard quoted. According,
the higher you go, the more the circle is. So
there's different.
yeah.
There's a lot of different opinions about it. Michael Maloof, who wrote A Nation Forsaken, says 50 miles is all you need. We'll get into the specific tests shortly. But what city would be ideal? This is a big hint.
Dallas?
No? Who said it? Who said it? Why? What'd you say? Dorothy. Yellow Brick Road, Kansas. So, ideally, well, not that it's practical information, but ideally that's where it would be. Back in 1859, this gentleman here was looking at the sun in late August, early September, over a period of 4 or 5 days. They experienced something called, they experienced an EMP. It was the first recorded EMP in history. What's this gentleman's name? Carrington. Yes, Carrington. It's known as the Carrington event. And what happened was the Victorian internet age with... See, my mind is gone. Yes, it disrupted that, but it had a very, very little effect on mankind at the time. This gentleman here, his name will come back to me. He was he was the senior technology director for the first initial nuclear explosion test with the Enzo. That's his name. Enzo something. Enzo something. And he was the first one to suggest, okay, we're going to do these tests. Let's have some sort of shielding around them to protect them. And there goes my mic. Okay. I'm going to throw some names at you. Prime, Starfish Prime, Bluegill, Triple Prime, Kingfish, Operation Fishbowl. What do you think that means?
Tests.
Those are tests. What about this? 127K2, 128K1, Project K. What is that?
Those are tests by the Russians.
Those are tests by the Russians. Some are tests by the Americans. Some are tested by the Russians. The most important test we've got to look at here is 184K3, because 127, 128, they were small nuclear weapons launched by the Russians in the early 60s to understand electromagnetic pulse, amongst other things. 184, I believe 127 and 128 were very low kilotons, is what nuclear weapons are rated at, and they jumped up a high percentage with 184. It's beyond me right now how much it is. I believe it was 100. I don't want to quote it. It was the first couple were like 1 kilotons, and then they jumped up to 100 and something, or 80. It was a very high number. And I'm jumping to Hawaii now. The American test, what they discovered in the early 60s, they launched it out into the ocean, and they found there was a lot of effects in Hawaii, and it disrupted alarm systems, communication systems had an impact. And that was the first sign of an effect on civilization. But with Russia, the Americans didn't intend to, in my opinion, they didn't intend to, they weren't intending to do anything to the people of Hawaii. They were playing with nuclear weapons, and they wow, this is a cool sort of byproduct, this EMP thing. Russia, through test 184 that I previously mentioned, launched a very large nuclear weapon over Karagandhi in Kazakhstan, because if you're going to play with nuclear weapons, you might as well do it in a country that doesn't belong to you. What they found is that there was the Karagandhi nuclear power plant there received so much electrical energy that it blew up the plant. There's not a lot of information on this, but there was a retired Russian military official talking to it in passing, and what happened was all this energy sort of surged in to this power plant and blew it up. This is my car. That's the car over there. That, as you can see, I've been having problems with this weekend as well. But we'll talk about car tests. The U.S. EMP Commission. So this was done in 2004. Don't quote me on that year. I'm not too sure. I know that the study was released in 2004. The U.S. EMP Commission was financially responsible. They borrowed vehicles from government agencies, specifically the Department of Defense. The total is 37 vehicles, 18 trucks, in a simulated EMP environment. So basically, they rolled in a car. They did tests both with the vehicle on and the vehicle off. They rolled this car into this room somewhere in some secret government agency. And then they had some sort of high voltage device to shoot down all this electricity onto it. They started with 25,000 kilovolts, I believe, and went up slowly to a maximum of 50,000. All vehicle years ranged from 86 to 2003. There have been some independent testing that was done by car manufacturers, but it wasn't specific to EMP with respect to a nuclear attack or solar flare or anything like that. What they were testing for is the power in ham radios and truckers that were setting off energy that could possibly trigger airbags. They were doing it more for liability reasons. Misconceptions in Hollywood. Here's the one thing. Let me go back to the car thing for a second. There was one truck that was stalled. Most of them had some sort of an issue with respect to the wipers didn't work. Nothing that affected the functionality of the vehicle. They could still drive the vehicle. In other instances, simply resetting the battery, resetting the computer or the car resolved the issue. But it's important to note that out of all those vehicles, one could not be reset or repaired. It needed to be towed away. Who's this guy? Tom Hanks. Tom Cruise. What movie do you think it's from? What happened in that movie? It's Electromagnetic Pulse. He went in and he changed the starter. Every movie that you see in the media or in Hollywood that talks about an EMP, ignore it. There's complete misconceptions about what it will affect and what it won't affect. Bill Nye the Science Guy made a documentary because of the misinformation online. There's the U.S. Air Force that hired him and said, hey, we want you to make this, we want our staff to have an appropriate, we want them to have the correct information with respect to what this is all about. So he created this video. This isn't public. We can't see it, but I thought it was interesting that the U.S. government came in and said, well, there's just so much garbage about misconceptions about what this thing is about that we've got to hire scientists to tell our soldiers so that they can react appropriately. Misconceptions by other preppers. This is probably the biggest downfall that we're going to see moving forward. If you research this on your own, and everything that I've told you right now, I've cited, I've got sources for. I'm not talking right now. This is all stuff from scientists. I'll tell you the sources shortly. But we'll get into this. We'll get into this right now, and we'll look at this. We'll look at this device. Some preppers say that this will block an EMP. Some survivalists. You know, not some blog forum comment from, Toto bunker shotgun guy. Like this is an entry from somebody that says, I'm an expert, I'm a prepper, this will or will not protect you with your devices. What do you guys think?
No. Not a chance.
Not a chance. No. Too much voltage.
It depends on how you look at it. Because technically if the surge comes through your service, that would protect you. But if the surge goes through your house and goes through the device itself, that's not going to do diddly squat.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's atmospheric.
How is it? Okay. How is it not atmospheric?
Well, like the situation where Russia went through the power system and overloaded their...
Nuclear plant?
Yeah.
That came.
If we're dealing with a surge versus an EMP.
Yeah, that's a
We're
surge
dealing with a
protector.
power surge.
That will protect you from a surge, not an EMP.
I'm talking specific to an EMP. Will this protect you from an EMP?
No, I would say.
You get 3 types of pulses. It'll protect you.
Okay. We've got a little bit of debate right here. This is not me. This is happypreppers.com. Tip number 4. Rely on your surge protectors. Surge protectors will also protect them, systems, electronics, against the effects of an EMP. And that comes from Survivalipedia. That sounds credible, doesn't it? Get the best surge protection possible and don't worry. Listen to that. Get the best. What kind of advice is that to me? If I listen to this guy and he says, get the best protection, don't worry. Okay, I've listened to this guy. I've got the best protection possible and don't worry. From Backdoor Survival.
Back door's a hint right there.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And we got a couple other comments here too. Off the grid news on the bottom there. They will protect the equipment connected to them. Those are people that think they work. These are people that say they don't work. Okay? These are credible sources. We got a problem here, don't we? Protective items like surge protectors, fuses, etc. don't work. That's from Culture Change. I don't have to read this. It's getting late. These people support it. Or excuse me, they say they don't work. This is from Dr. William Forstchen, who wrote a book called 1 Second After. He's been used as a consultant with respect to EMPs. He's considered an authority figure. As far as I'm concerned, he's an authority figure. And this is what he says. Unlike a lightning strike or other power surges, other types of power surges, an EMP surge is front-loaded, meaning it doesn't do a build-up for a couple of microseconds, allowing enough time for the circuit breaker to read that trouble is on the way and shut down. I'm not going to read every single word, but he basically explains why it doesn't work. So it's unfortunate that we've got this one example of many different things online that claim to be credible sources that say this is going to work or this isn't. What I've found personally is that the sources I've got, these are a few right here. Michael Maloof, Jerry Manuelson, this guy's a genius down here. This guy's gone above and beyond more so anybody in EMP than I've ever seen, as far as I'm concerned. What I find is the experts that talk about it, they'll get to a point where if they don't know, and realistically we don't know, and I'll talk about that near the end, they'll admit it. They'll say, we don't know because of, all these different factors. NASA, whoops, I just jumped ahead like 5 slides.
400 highway there.
What's that?
Saw the 400 highway for a second.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the 401.
Parking lot.
EMP Commission, NOAA, and NASA are my additional sources for this presentation. Sorry?
Sorry, I just had
You heckling me, man?
Well,
I had a long day.
That's never a straight answer.
NASA, never a straight answer. Okay, well, if we can't trust NASA as a source for some information, then it's beyond me. But I'm not exclusively looking at NASA. A lot of the information I've gathered is correlated and directly relates with the other sources. 401, everybody knows the 401, so we've got about 450,000 vehicles passing between Weston and Highway 400 as per the 2.8. I don't know why I have the 401 logo there. I guess I should have the 400. There's a photo so you can look at what a highway looks like. These are gas pumps. I think this was probably the smartest point that Jerry Emanuelson said. This is a smart thing. We got vehicles that may survive, may not, we're not sure. So we may have a lot of vehicles on the road. However, it's of his opinion that all the gas pumps would be kaput. So whatever you've got in your tank right now, if an EMP happened right now, unless you've got stockpiles of food, that's it. But if you're thinking ahead like me, then you're thinking about portable electronic pumps that are in a Faraday cage to pump gasoline out of reservoirs from stations. Electronics, what's going to happen to cell phones? There might be some telephone service if you're lucky. Notice he says might, he's not consistent. He doesn't say, he's not survivapedia saying cell phones will not work for sure. I understand, I know what's going on. That's a good logical assumption, I would say. Internet.
Bye-bye.
Most of the...
A lot of it's glass rather than copper now.
Sorry?
A lot of the infrastructure is now glass rather than copper, which isn't going to mind nearly as much.
With respect to...
Inducing long surges in long conductors.
What's...
It's going to crash the routers, yes.
Okay, so that's... All right, so if we've got a situation with routers or fiber optics, I'm assuming is what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, so fiber optics, if anybody doesn't know, is basically you're shooting lights through plastic with binary code, and it's going at the speed of light, so it's very quick, but unfortunately, well, it used to be quite fragile. Okay, I agree. But if you want to get more technical with that, afterwards, we can. But the reality is, more than likely, a lot of the routers, the junction points of the internet are going to crash. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you want to get technical, I can get technical. Airplanes. What's going to happen to airplanes? This is something that I never read this anywhere. I didn't, look at any video and they said all the airplanes are going to fall. Like I was like, well, this was my question in my head. I was like, what about the airplanes? This is Jerry Emanuelson saying, 250,000, 500,000 will die in the first few minutes, and as a result of airplane crashes. So then we'll follow my logic here for a second. So I thought, okay, airplanes fall out of the sky. Where are they coming from? How many planes are in the sky? So I looked at different flight paths, where they're going. This is Toronto, right here in the middle. And you can see sort of where most of the traffic's coming in. There's a website called flightaware.com, which says, I think it's 5,000 at the max, whatever time that is in the day that we'll see airplanes in. Most from the south, east, and west. So logically, what does that tell you? Where's a good area to go? North. Yeah, plus if you see how Ontario sort of funnels down with the U.S., and they've got a lot more powerful weapons than we do, it might be a good idea to go north. I don't agree with this map. I did this a couple of years ago for a presentation on this, a long time ago, but it shows military stations, nuclear power plants, airports. Basically, green is good, red is bad, sort of thing. So I would change this a bit, but it's my opinion that if something occurred, the red areas would be bad areas. When I did this a couple of years ago, there's a lady that said something like, well, with respect to nuclear power plants, right? Because if you need somebody to manage all that energy, and if you don't, then you have a very, very, very bad situation. So,
not with the can-do reactor.
Okay.
The rods drop out of the can-do reactor if the electricity goes on.
But the log
all right.
They shut down.
So you wouldn't have another Fukushima in Ontario, you're saying?
No, it would not happen with can-do.
Okay, do they have can-do reactors in these power plants?
That's all we have in Canada.
Here's the thing. With all due respect, I hear yet... Sorry?
The Americans blow up, but you can do...
Okay, that's cool. If somebody... Well, it's not cool, but you know what I mean. That's cool. No, here's the thing with that. I hear mixed views on that. You're saying, no, it won't happen. And now, if I'm living beside a nuclear power plant and I go to a prepper meet and some of them are crazy, not you. No, he's actually a cool guy. I'm not saying that. No. This guy's he's a cool guy. I like this guy a lot. I'm not saying that. I'm not necessarily going to put all my confidence with everything about my life to say, well, I met this guy. He said it's that it's a certain type of technology and it's not going to happen. To me, I need a lot more strength. I need my father-in-law to be the senior technology guy at the power plants to tell me that in order for me to feel confident. That's just me. That's just how I feel. You could very well be right. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm saying is I just need more. Yeah, that's all. That's it.
More credibility.
Yeah, well, maybe he's a nuclear scientist. I don't know.
Phone's wallet. Where's your nuclear gun?
Hospitals and medical concerns. Pacemakers I've heard mixed things about. According to Nation Forsaken, Michael Maloof, he says they could potentially heat up and burn the surrounding tissue. That's what he says. There was a study done back in the early 90s by the U.S. Army Science Department, and they said no, the EMPs won't affect it. But my logic is, in the early 90s, technology has probably advanced somewhat, making the electronics for pacemakers likely more susceptible. That's just my logic. It's an assumption. I don't think there's any definitive answer there. Citizens of the country who have been injured or killed have been in a hospital, intensive care units, and transportation accidents. This is Jerry Manuel saying that, there's a lot of people that in hospitals and on highways are going to die in addition to the airplanes. Insulin. What's going to happen with insulin? Sorry?
You got no power. You can't produce it and cool it.
You can't cool it. You can't refrigerate it.
Insulin has a shelf life.
It's got a shelf life. Where do you get insulin from?
Chemical plant.
Well, it's GM now. It used to be from pig pancreas.
What's going to happen to these people? Pig's pancreas. Excellent. Yes, you're absolutely right. You can't, but you need a lab in order to, and a lot of knowledge and to be able to derive insulin from a pancreas. So, if you're relying on insulin, I would suggest you start researching that. Emergency staff. I don't know what I got quoted here, so I don't know what to say to lead up to it. The military is very concerned about the battlefield survivability of its communication systems, vehicles, computers, etc., etc., etc. We know the military is concerned. I got a question mark here. I don't know what it means. I don't know who put this chart together. I think this was actually U.S. EMP Commission put this chart together, and they're saying that all these, we know that everything is interdependent. We know that everything is connected. Finances is connected with finances. Something happens in Iraq, financially it affects us here. Similar to that, with an EMP, everything is affected here. The only thing they're missing, in my opinion, is the food. So they've got oil, gas, communications, water, banking, government, emergency services, transportation, electric, power. All these systems will be affected in a very, very bad way. This was the first real study done by the U.S. EMP Commission. The report it's a long title. You guys can read it. My throat is sore. I don't know why I've got a lightning bolt there. Okay. It would likely be months or years before most of the electrical grid could be repaired because of the destruction of large number of transformers, the electric grid. So if we have an EMP, yes?
You're looking 10 to 20 years.
Okay.
That's only from talking to guys that work at Hydro.
All right.
And the parts come from China, I've heard too.
Our transformers come from.
So this gentleman here is actually the electrical apprentice that I was talking about. This reference here is American, yeah. So maybe it's different. You're saying 10 to 20, so even worse. What we're going to have is something that I like to call a chain reaction. We have an EMP, we don't have electricity. We don't have basic electronics, we don't have internet, we don't have Facebook. So what's going to happen if we don't have electricity? Here's a question. Do we need electricity to live?
No.
We don't. How long have we been living on electricity, dependent on it? 100 years. How long has mankind been around?
2,000, 3,000.
Thousands.
Disagree, but
There's all, sorry? Millions? Okay. Oh, it's not, okay, a long time. That was the answer I was looking for. So, if we've got an EMP, we're going to have a chain reaction of other types of disasters. Now, this is a pretty smart crowd here, so it's not going to take too much to know what's going to happen if this happens. Got an EMP, no power, no access to a hospital. We're doing a lot more work physically because you've got to feed the wood stove now because that's your only source of heat. You're cutting a lot more wood. You're getting tense, like Doug was suggesting with your arms, because you need to do physical things. Everybody here can chop wood, right, with an axe. But take that concept and multiply it by 10 every day. So our susceptibility to injury is going to increase as a result of having to depend on being more self-reliant. What I'm suggesting is there's a really good chance you're going to cut yourself. That's the whole point. So when you cut yourself, what happens when you cut yourself? Infection. What kind of infection? Okay, any number of types of infections. So what do we do when we get an infection? Antibiotics. Yes. Thank you. Can you get antibiotics in a post-EMP situation? Plants.
Oh, there's a good.
Okay.
Pet store.
Pet store. Fish antibiotics. Who thinks you can use fish antibiotics?
Oh, fish with that theory.
And
Fish
you
in-
can also use old or expired antibiotics if you happen to keep them.
Yeah.
They will still work. The chances of them working like as well as they would work if they weren't expired is it goes down the older that they are. From a medical doctor.
U.S.
You can definitely use
You're absolutely correct. The U.S. government had $1 billion, a lot of money in antibiotics, a lot of money. And they did this test to determine if they were still good 10 years after. They were. That's the first thing. Antibiotics last a lot longer. The pharmaceutical companies actually wanted to shut them up and not tell them that. They want to put an expiry. And why would they want to do that?
More money.
Exactly. So fish antibiotics are, I've studied fish antibiotics extensively. Google it, you'll see an hour-and-a-half video on it that goes more in depth than any other.
I've ordered them and used them.
Okay.
On eBay, they will still sell it to you, but they will blank out your purchase history, which I've never seen before. That you, or in Canada anyways, that you've ordered fish antibiotic because there's still a loophole in there. They don't like
The loophole is this: you need a prescription in Canada, but you can buy the exact same pill. Not a similar pill. You can buy the exact same pill. Somebody was talking about this earlier. When you buy a fish antibiotic, you get a fish tank, right? Everybody's got a fish tank, right? So you got a fish tank like this big, 10 gallons or whatever. There's 2 fish in there. There's 20 fish in there. There's big fish, little fish. Doesn't matter. You get moxicillin, cephalexin, which have these trademark names with the fish industry, like Fish Mox or Fish Pen, or give me another one, Robert.
doxycycline.
Doxycycline. All these other trademark names for the animals. But what they'll give you too is they'll give you the milligrams in human dosage, 250 and 500.
And they all come from the same factories. They all meet the same specifications. They're all tested to the same.
That's a whole other presentation. But my point with, and you can watch that online if you like me. Sure.
You're talking fish antibiotic. Is this? Okay, I'm gonna sound like a newbie, but
No, please.
Is this fish antibiotic for the fish, or is it the?
It's intended for the fish. Fish gets,
Made
no,
by fish byproducts.
made by fish.
Well, made by fish part. Is that what?
No.
or is it-
No.
or is
Okay, so
it
it's-
supposed to be for the fish. Okay.
Fish gets sick.
Taken off the same assembly line as the
Oh,
ones
okay.
for
I'm just
humans.
curious.
The same stuff you would use, but used just for your fish. They market it for your fish.
Yeah, so my point with the sizes of fish and all that is they say put a 250 or 500 milligram in the aquarium and that's it. It's indiscriminatory of the number of fish, and the dosage matches what humans would take. So, and I've heard directly from doctors that they are made in the exact same factory. So health or infection is going to be a very big concern if an EMP occurs. Litter. We don't want to have garbage people, so this is another health concern that we'll have because we'll be more susceptible to infection or disease if we don't have proper sanitation. Crime. That should be quite obvious. And this was just funny, I had to put that up. Siska? Siska, can I get a smoke?
After the presentation.
Yeah. Department of Defense.
What did that meme say?
What's that?
What did the meme say?
The thing?
The government will take care of us.
Oh, and it's an empty shelf. I get it.
Yeah.
Cool. See,
Hope you guys don't mind. It's been a long day. I'm going to have a smoke and a beer.
we're judging it.
Judge me. Please judge me. I don't care.
We need to elect 7 people to judge.
There's a lighter there too.
Thank you. All right. Department of Defense. Department of Defense. Unfortunately, a lot of this information is American because there's just, well, we'll find out in a second what kind of information we have as Canadians in our country with respect to an EMP. So the Department of Defense had simulations for years, and they sort of ignored the notion of an EMP. It's almost like it's almost like somebody with a psychological disorder that is oblivious, or I don't know how to word it. You know, they put their heads in the sand about it, basically. And they did simulations with EMPs for the longest time, and every single time they failed. What does that mean for us? What does EMP really mean for us? It means this. What's this? 1850s. 1850s. Does anybody know who this man is?
Did you move to Benchero to join the Mennonites? You laugh, but it's not a bad idea at that point.
No more drugs for that man. Does anybody know who this gentleman is? This is the former CIA director. Mr. Woosley is his name. He's very concerned about this. So this isn't people that are... There's a lot of credibility. This man. Yes. It's a politician. It's another politician, a couple of retired generals, and an ambassador. These guys are very concerned about an EMP. My point with this and these people is that this isn't, you know, Coast to Coast AM with UFO Phil calling in talking about this stuff. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of credibility when you have the former CIA director. There's a great video with him online. It's a little dry, saying, look, this is a concern. This is a really big concern. Bill 5026, we'll bang through this quick. It was basically the GRID Act that was stopped by this woman. Months of research went into it. She's from Alaska, and she prevented it from happening. I know that the U.S. defense has a strong interest as an offensive mechanism with respect to EMP, as opposed to defensive. This is a project they're working on where they were connected with Boeing to create basically an airplane that could focus in onto specific rooms and EMP that room or that building. There's a picture. They've got actually, I forget what this is called. It's a plane that's completely EMP proof apparently, made by Boeing and the Department of Defense. This was an act that was raised by an Arizona politician that basically forces them to discuss it is the best way to put it. Let's go here. Let's go here for a second. Does everybody know who these guys are? I've talked to these guys. They're nice guys.
They don't exist.
So in Ontario, we are regulated as far as safety. Our preparedness safety is regulated through the Emergency Management Ontario, which is a branch of the Ministry of Public Safety and Security Services. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's not exactly correct, but I can't remember the...
Ministry of Public Safety and Correctional Services. There we go. There's only 2 hits. When you search Google, you can do this thing that says site, and you can put the website, and then you can type what you want to say, and it will only search that particular website for that phrase. So our government has two searches, or 2 hits on the emergency management website. Fleming College EMP program is actually emergency management program. It doesn't even relate to an electromagnetic pulse. But we do have this 1 hit here through our government. So what's our government going to do? We got 3 documents. 3 documents on this as far as the preparedness aspect is concerned from the Ontario government. There's nothing really spectacular in here. It talks about the disaster in a very sort of negative way. There's going to be food shortages. People will be unable to access their financial records. It does talk about it. I like this one. Alarms would not function. Alarms would not function. They understand it. They talk about it, but there's nothing on the website that gives you any suggestions of what you can do to, or what they will do to resolve it. Emergency Management Ontario, in addition to an EMP, in my opinion, equals unprepared. There was something on the Department of Defense website. I don't know what this means, but it does sort of insinuate that they are, this was back in 90-something, electromagnetic pulse protection for CF equipment systems and installations. Proceeding standing Senate. Okay, so this was a meeting that happened in 24, and they had this very large meeting with all these sort of political figures across Canada, and at the very end of the meeting, this was another thing that I found, the chair said this. Anybody want to read this for me? My throat's sore. Go for it, Brian. Nice and loud.
Colleagues, could I ask one more question before we adjourn? One area we have not touched on is the possible threat of an electromagnetic pulse attack, a phraseology that most Canadians have never heard of. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Thank you, Brian. Colin Robertson, Canadian Defence and Foreign Affairs Institute. This is a quote from him. It certainly is, in response to that, it certainly is the one area where, again, the experts I talk to who understand this feel that we are not at all well prepared. But there is something that applies not just to government side, but also to the business community, which I find personally insulting, because this is a guy that says, well, you know, we're unprepared, and we've got, in addition to the government being concerned, we've got to worry about the business too. What other entity or group is he neglecting to mention?
People? Citizens.
The people, civilians. How do we cope with this? This is an area that requires a lot of attention. That was 2014.
And it was the Senate subcommittee.
There's my opinion.
Yep.
This isn't even this is what they're telling me based on the information they have online. Bad places to be. What's a bad place to be in a post-EMP? In the air.
HA?
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine works for Southwest Airlines. He's a pilot. And he said that there are over 6,000 aircraft in the air over North America at any one time during the day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
6,000 aircraft.
That's a lot. The 5,000 quote that I got was from a couple years ago.
He said there would be burning holes in the earth all over North America about 3 minutes after an EMP.
There'll be burning holes in the earth all over North America within 3 minutes.
Is a lightning strike the same as an EMP?
No.
No.
Let me get through a few slides, and then maybe we'll get a couple people up here to answer some technical questions. Highways. Highways building, specifically elevators, I think would be a very bad place. Subways would be a bad place. This is like my logic, if you want to throw in your 2 cents of where you think. Hospitals would be a bad place, in my opinion. People.
Anywhere there's people.
My opinion is that there's a direct correlation between desperate people in a survival situation, the density of desperate people, and your personal ability to survive. Katrina is a good example of this. I mean, this is government coming in and taking care of you. So in Katrina, they threw them all into a stadium, and there was a lot of controversy in terms of how the government assisted people. So I personally don't want to be in the hands of government's care if an EMP occurs. Good places to be. See, it's not all bad. What's that look like? It's a bunker. It's a bunker. Rural locations, like a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Very, very remote locations that are difficult to access, such as an island in the middle of nowhere. This says 6 nations. This is too close for me. The concept here is a native reserve. I know we've got a few up north that are very inaccessible, but if you could, it's funny. I mentioned plane being bad. But if you knew a pilot that could fly, and by magic it was still working to some degree, hopping on a plane after an EMP and flying away is the best thing you could do to a remote location. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I think for a short period of time, Amish communities and rural communities that are self-reliant will have some value. But if you got there, then eventually criminals will get there too. But there is some value in saying that people that are self-sustainable or self-reliant are going to have a lot more. They're going to be less affected. Does everybody know what a Faraday cage is?
I don't. Can you tell me?
Sure. So it's an enclosure, conductive material that's insulated on the inside, and the concept, the idea is that when any sort of electric energy hits it, it's unable to penetrate it, and it goes around it. So the contents on the inside are protected. There's a lot of information on this. So I didn't want to drag my a tin can here and show you what it is, but it's a very, very, very simple concept.
Like a car, being in a car, if lightning were to hit a car? Like,
if lightning were to hit a car, lightning's different.
It's like
As that analogy, sure, I guess, yeah.
On a Faraday cage, your microwave stops the microwaves from getting out. That's a Faraday cage.
Yeah, it is. And you can actually, people have used microwaves as Faraday cages too. One way to test that, put your cell phone in the Faraday cage, and that's not it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be protected exclusively, but you call your cell phone while it's in the microwave.
They could work as well.
Yes, that's true. Because last time I did that, I sealed my phone into a Mylar bag as a demonstration, and it did not ring.
Chase?
Yes.
Those barrels that Robert is selling, the blue barrels,
Yeah.
would they be a sort of a Faraday cage? Or
No, because they're plastic. Has to be conductive material. This is a list by Survival Mom. Now, I'm not going to say this is right or wrong. This is right for her. This is stuff that you would put into a Faraday cage. So we've got a laptop, digital camera, DVD player, computer hard drives, radio equipment, blah, 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 blah. Cool stuff. This is from another source. Radios, flashlight, generation, batteries, calculators, wonderful electronics we're going to put in our Faraday cage. Here's another one. This is by EMPcover.com. EMPcover.com. Medical devices, two-way radios, practical, this sounds like smart stuff to me, to put into a Faraday cage.
You want to be able to have all the information at compressed space. That's why the tablets.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Tablets. Perfect. The reasoning behind storing electronic media is simply, instead of having to carry all your information in large formats, books, etc., small rechargeables. You can store a massive amount of data on a laptop or a...
You sure can. I'm going to mention that in about 4 slides. What you put in a Faraday cage is a very subjective logic. What I would put in would be different from what you would put in. This is all me. This isn't from some blog or anything like that. It's a magic box when you think about it. Think about this for a second. Think about this for a second. We could have an EMP. I don't even think anything's going to happen. I'm a prepper, but I don't think anything's going to happen. I enjoy my life. I like beer. I like camping. I like long walks on the beach. But we've got this Faraday cage. Think of it as a magic box. I mean, if something were to occur, we're going back to the 1850s. That's the way that I see it. The first thing I would consider is some way to generate power. And this is pinpoint on why I think it's subjective, because you guys may not know what to do with a DC motor, where I could make a hydroelectric system or turn it into a wind turbine or whatever. But for you, it could be a solar panel or something like that. So for me, it makes sense that if you're storing electronics, you're going to need some sort of power to generate those electronics. So why not start here? Why not start with a way to generate power for whatever you're storing? Health. I don't have any health conditions yet, but if there was any sort of medical concern with respect to electronics, then health would be the next thing. I don't know which one of the two I would choose, but anything relating to security or communications, two-way radios, ham radios, anything of that nature, security, anything relating to security, or excuse me, yeah, that's right, communications and security. So they kind of go hand in hand, because two-way radio is a good example. You want to talk and find out what's going on. This is the Greek symbol for knowledge, and that's exactly what I would do. I would store tons and tons and tons of books, not just on survival, but on everything, on various tablets. For me, it's music. For you, it could be a photo album of your family. This is more from a psychological perspective for me. Psychology is 80% survival. So if I'm listening to Tool, Soundgarden, or Led Zeppelin, and it puts me in a better spirit, that works for me. But some form of entertainment. Lights, really important to me. From there, that's my Jetta with the hood up. Any sort of spare parts relating to vehicles. Now, if you guys want an exclusive list of what I've got, I can't fit it in one PowerPoint. I'd be happy to send it to you. But I wanted to sort of generalize what I would have in my Faraday cage, or what you should have by breaking it down into logical sequence. Doesn't that make sense? You need power first. I didn't even elaborate on. I know it's late, but you'd have stuff like charge controllers, DC motors, bridge rectifiers. Okay, we're going to go through a couple of myths, and then I'm going to sum up. Another 20 minutes, so we're done. So EMP is not a problem, since there are many ways to protect against it. In fact, there are many ways to protect against it, but they are not being implemented. Faraday cage will work 100% of the time. No. Asking how much shielding that you will need is likely asking how much of a coat you will need in winter. Depends upon how cold you will get, upon how sensitive you are to the cold. Saying that a specific electronic is going to be more susceptible to another electronic based on their sensitivity. Solar storms only affect the side of the Earth that is facing the sun, and that's not true. They tend to disturb the entire magnetic field of the sun. There are scientists who can predict the probability of solar storm 5 to 10 years. No, they can't. It's 2 to 3 days, according to NOAA. With the nuclear bomb, there's zero prediction. There's no prediction. We can't predict it. Gulf of Mexico, no advanced tracking devices, no advanced. They're saying shipping containers, and all of 8 minutes it's done. Severe solar storms always occur at the peak of the cycle. So I talked about that before. No, just because it's the middle of, our 11.5-year cycle, it doesn't mean that we can't have something dramatic occur halfway through. If the electrical grid failed, natural gas would continue to flow. No, it's under pressure, often with an electrical pump. Wild card. All right. You get like 6 slides, so I'm going to slow down for the kind people that stuck around this far. Wild card. Again, this is my own personal philosophy. This is the wild. This is, what kind of that it's going to affect us in a large way. We understand that it's going to take a substantial amount of time to build our come back to a state where we are today. Years. The first is the kilovolts per meter intensity. This is the first wild card, because they did studies back in the early 2000s. They said, well, started at 25, we went up to 50,000 kilovolts. If we're good for 50,001 kilovolts with this car, with that intensity, then our military systems are all done based on a certain voltage. The wild card is, what if the voltage is 60,000? Then your plans fail. Well, you don't know, because if you haven't tested that high, how would you know? Electronic complexity. Back in the 60s, when Hawaii was affected, there was no, the complexity of electronics was not as complex as it is today. I mean, we're talking, this day and age, we're talking about using something called graphene as a conductive medium. Electronics today are just they're much more complex than, and they are getting much more complex than they've previously been. More importantly, the dependency, and I think this is where it's not really discussed that I've seen. Our dependency on electricity is going to be our failure as a human race if an EMP occurs. That's a bold statement. It's true, though. Our dependency on electronics, it'll be our undoing, because we all depend on it. And I know I said this last year, and I know people probably saw this in videos, but it's true. When you have a school, I know that people are probably rolling their eyes because they heard this, but it's important for other people to hear this. They did this study, a psychology department at a university, back when we had flip phones that could tell us our eye color. Very simple flip phones, and Facebook was out, and they so they couldn't access Facebook on their phone unless they wanted to push, you know, the number 1 3 times to get the letter C. So what that did to students by day 3 is it exhibited symptoms that were consistent with heroin withdrawal. So what that tells me is if people are going to experience symptoms of heroin withdrawal without social media, and that's, you know, that's 1 pixel of the O here on everything on the screen. You know what I mean? That's a very small fragment. Very small fragment. And people are psychologically angry and whatever it is that you know, if you've, anybody here done heroin? Can you tell us about it? So that's, our dependency on it is going to be our undoing, but most importantly, terrorism. I mean, we've got foreign powers, foreign capabilities, Russia, China, that have this capability to do this, and there's people out there that don't like this. There's people out there that don't like me because I have long hair, because I've got brown skin, because I'm a guy, because I don't believe in something, because I do believe in something, because I hug a tree, because I cut down a tree, because I do nothing to a tree, because I talk to a tree. There's a segment in our population society that doesn't want you to be around, and they're going to go to drastic measures to do things, and it's plausible with nuclear technology that's from the 60s that they can get away with it. And it's a scary thought. It really is. I mean, the initial damage, in my opinion, if you want my final thought, my final opinion is, think of a place to go. You need a place to go. Stockpile food, stockpile fish, antibiotics. Medicine is going to be gold. Fish antibiotics is going to be gold. You don't have to spend your life savings, but start thinking about it now. We're fortunate enough in Canada, which is something to the effect of 75% crown land, 75% forest, that we have options to disappear. Initially, future of mankind is this. This is a symbol. This means alliance. This is the only future that we have if an EMP occurs. I don't know what's going to happen with the government, but it would be important to me to see an alliance of people, a community of people that come forward and connect and work together for the better of mankind if this occurs. I mean, we're all lone rangers here to some degree with what we're doing. I don't know where people are going. I don't know what sort of stores they have. But it would be important that we connect as a community, as Canadians, if something occurs, to restore good nature within humanity. Any questions?
The Faraday cases, right?
Yeah.
Is it more effective when they're grounded?
Yes.
I've heard it depends on the size. I've heard yes and I've heard no. And I never got a specific answer from Jerry Emanuelson. I've spoken to him, but not specific to that. I did, and he emailed me back and he said, for bigger type structures or Faraday cages, grounding is good. For smaller ones, it's not. But the specific size, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that one jet, the EMP protection. Are they building more that way, or is that just like the president or something? Or?
Probably military.
That was it's so expensive. It's very expensive. So it's cost prohibitive for passenger liners in general.
Okay, so good question. So are they building more? Are we doing things? Yes, the government is doing things to some degree. In America anyways, we know that they're doing things, but that's where my wild card comes in. Let's say they put in Ontario, they put the grid in, they harden it to be EMP proof, but for how many kilovolts per meter? So if it's hardened to 50,000, we get a solar flare that gives us 60,000, maybe that's just that extra push of energy. Same with the plane in terms of hardening, because things will eventually become susceptible with so much electricity.
The plane is likely to go down with a nuclear explosion.
There you go.
EMP.
Yep.
The coronal mass
ejection
affects things that are long wires, especially because as the magnitude fluctuates, it generates the electricity in the wires. So anything that has long wires in it on a coronal mass exemption likely has real big pumps. That's why the transformers are going. That's why the high power grids That's why they knocked out the plant in northern Quebec.
Okay.
20 years, 30 years
Yep.
ago.
Yep.
Okay. Long wires tend to get it from the coronal mass ejections.
I was not aware of that. Okay.
So those are the things. Those are the things that you have to worry about. Of course, you still end up at the ground.
Let's okay. If it's that's cool. Let's say that's the case, or it's a nuclear explosion, or it's this or that, and this is affected, and this isn't. This is affected, and this isn't. If it's this circumstance or that circumstance, it's still in a big circle of. Are the kids in bed? It's a big circle of F mode. It's irrespective of if. Do you hear what I'm saying? I was not aware of that, but irrespective of that, it doesn't matter if certain things are affected or not. If it's a geomagnetic storm or a nuclear explosion, we're still screwed, in my opinion.
Another factor too, even if some of the grid isn't taken down, we're so reliant on satellites, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if satellites go down, there's so many systems that'll fail because they can't communicate.
Yeah, you're right. Now, what are we doing about it?
And it doesn't take a full EMP pulse to do it. The Canada lost both its Alouette satellites to the solar farm.
Any more questions?
I have a very stupid basic question.
Sure.
Is it possible, because you said like a great place to be after like a solar flare or something would be like on a plane somewhere? Is there a possibility that it could happen twice in a row and we'd all be screwed?
You know what? I've thought about this. And I guess if I was an evil country and I really wanted to screw the population, well, maybe I shouldn't say this. If they were smart, what they would do is an EMP, wait 3 months, wait 6 months, and then introduce another one, because the idea of people like, oh my God, it's an EMP, and then they get all their stuff out and they start rebuilding. Wait a period of time and do another one to sort of euchre them, if that's the case. But that's not the case with, I don't know, is the answer. If somebody is going to not do two, and obviously you're correct, that would, you'd be euchred if another one occurred.
But naturally could, like...
Solar flare is a one-time thing.
So it's not possible.
That can...
So naturally...
It can be... No, yeah, coronal mass ejection is something that's going to play with our magnetosphere. Yeah, I always get that word wrong. Yeah. But you can see how that would be smart, though. The solar flare, and you could find a plane that, for whatever reason wasn't affected, or you could reset it, similar to what they did with the Department of Defense back in the early 2000s. Then you could fly to that remote native reserve where the only access is by plane, and you've got you're in a self-sustainable society. That was the logic there by getting away.
Absolutely no.
Yeah.
Just with my luck, I'd be on the plane and there'd be a second one. I got out of the first one, final destination, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that kind of luck, maybe it's time to check out anyway.
Cool. Are we good? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Quick question. First off, good use of the Rebel Alliance symbol.
Yes. Thank you.
What's the number one action item for the community then? You've got that symbol up there. What do we do to better prepare?
Would you, that's a good question. Would you trust the government? Would you run to the government?
Not a chance.
There's something in law, in Canadian law, that basically says the government has the right to take your resources.
They can shove their gun laws up their ass and won't obey anything.
So what was your question again, Eric? Sorry.
What can we do? What we can do to improve the community to be?
That's the effects of an EMP are so dramatic. You need to be. That's thinking way far ahead. You really need to be able to take care of yourself. If you survive that long with your own resources, what would you do to better your community?
Share information.
Well, it's 1850. It's the Amish, like I said. How would you better the community? You know what? Share your resources. Get connected with like-minded people. Get connected with, protect good people. If there's people out there that have no idea what prepper even means, and they're good people, take them into your community. Support them. Build a community. Be a leader.
Prepare to be a leader. Because that's not something that everybody can just stand up and do. You have to have certain skill sets in order to be valued in the community.
Sure, and I'm sure people will jump to the, people will be placed in opportunities to do this. So, and I don't think they even have to be preppers. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Rebel Alliance.